so this is attempt number 2. The first one was a little choppy, so I'm gonna try to redo it. So today I'm just going over on how to build a cheap E36 drift car. This is my CAtuned car. It's a 1995 BMW 318i. It's got an M42, and I think I probably have like under $5 grand into it total. So it's not too bad for a CAtuned car. And as you can see behind me, this is the non-budget E36. So this one, I don't even want to think about how much money I have into it. At some point, I'm probably going to do a build breakdown, but it's a disgusting amount into the JZ swap. That's why it's not done yet. And this has kind of been my back burner, kind of keep me going while that one's being built car. So this one, I've been putting pretty much all budget parts into it. I think the most expensive part I put into it was probably the clutch and flywheel setup, and that's a Spec stage 1 and a RHD, I think it was a 9-pound, maybe an 11-pound lightweight flywheel. So that is a huge game changer for these cars. When you get these things from the factory, they're pretty slow off the line. Once you do the lightweight flywheel and stage 1 clutch, which uses it's an M20 stage 1 clutch, and then you have to use a E23 E21 323 throwout bearing. I'll throw that in the description too, because I might be remembering that wrong. But pretty simple setup. It's pretty much an M20 setup that you would use on an E30, but they're same thing for the M42s. And you're never really going to make enough power that you're going to have problems with a stage 1. If anything, stage 1's probably a little aggressive for this setup. It does make the street driving a little choppy, but it's definitely manageable. I've never had an issue with it, and I've street driven it for like a year with this setup. Actually, I take that back. It's probably only been like 8 months with this setup, but still. Pretty reliable setup. And yeah, I'm going to just go over a few other things that are in it and put together a little part sheet on how budget you can build an E36 if you're kind of playing with the idea of building one yourself. So this one, I will have to admit, I started off very cheap. It wasn't running. I got it for $1,200, and it was an original 5-speed car. The previous owner didn't really know a whole ton about the BMWs, and he was having issues having it staying idling, and what it turned out to be was all of the vacuum lines were actually zip tied together. So as you can imagine, that didn't work too well. So took care of that, and car fired up. Still had a few random little here and there issues. I ended up doing a ton of maintenance that ended up like it wasn't what was causing my issue. I was having a long crank no start issue. Turned out it was the ECU pins. They opened up on me, so that's not a super common issue, but if you're having a long crank no start issue, I guess it's worth a shot taking a look, because car was sitting for pretty much 4 months with issues starting, and it turned out to be pins. So stupid little things have been the problems with this car. It hasn't really had any major ones. A few other big things that I did do was originally it had a 444 welded diff in it, and that shredded. It made it so second gear was a little short and third gear was a little long, so that's the only reason I even switched it up. I'm sure I could have gotten used to that setup, and with a little more practice just grab third and a few more clutch kicks been there. But I ended up converting the whole rear to a 391 medium case setup out of a 328i, using finned brakes and bigger axles, the 391 diff, which is a bit stronger than the small case. And when you do that, you also have to use the 328 rear half of the drive shaft. It's a little bit shorter because the 391 diff sticks out a little bit longer, the tongue's a bit bigger. But that was a completely unnecessary upgrade. I just did it so that in the future, if I do end up going LS or some other motor in this car, it's probably going to get an LS at some point, but I just figured for reliability, might as well put a medium case in it. And I'm going to grab the camera so that I can show you a few more things in depth instead of just... So engine wise, I did new exhaust gaskets. Wasn't really a necessary thing. I had a small exhaust leak going, so figured might as well do it while we were in there. I did a new valve cover. Right now it has no thermostat in it. I have a brand new one for it, but last season I was running a bit warm and I ended up taking it out, and I've just left it like that, which
probably isn't the best idea for long-term reliability, but since I've only been driving it in warm weather, it hasn't caused any issues. And then I went ahead and deleted pretty much every vacuum line other than it's got intake to the idle air control valve, and then it has the little vacuum lines to the injectors for the ventilating, and then it's got the vent back there for the PCV, and that's about it. So simplified the engine as much as possible. I did end up deleting, I believe it's called Vicus. It's like a variable, it's a flap timing in the intake for a little bit more low-end torque. But I was having issues with a bunch of vacuum leaks down there, and I couldn't find the exact vacuum lines, and I was at the track actually. So ended up deleting it, and it didn't cause really a noticeable difference in the low end. So if I do end up having like low end issues, I guess I could always put that back, but since it hasn't caused any issues, I'm not really going to focus on it. This cold air intake, this is an Amazon adapter, so that was I think 30 bucks maybe, with the cone filter. Make sure you get a non-oiled one though, because if you get an oiled cone filter, you're going to have issues with your idle air control valve. It's a pretty common thing with these older BMWs. A ton of people throw in the idle air control, or the cold air intake filters that are oiled, and then they have issues with idle air control valve, which I actually have a video showing how to clean that. But for engine wise, it's pretty much stock. And while it has 106 horsepower or something like that, it also has about 100 foot-pounds of torque. So that's I don't know, it's enough to slide around. And then I also have a CAtuned full aluminum radiator. That was about 300 bucks with that's a Flex-a-lite 1200 CFM hot rod pusher fan. I think that was like 120 bucks. And then I literally just took 2 pieces of steel, cut them, and haven't had any cooling issues. I'm sure if I really wanted to, I could cut a little piece of steel there to make it so that it's like better focused on the radiator, but since I haven't had any issues, haven't really touched it. So now we'll get into some of the suspension and angle mods. So if we look in the wheel well here, you can see those little silver blocks there. That is PMC angle blocks. So those are about 100 bucks. They increase the steering by supposedly 30%. And then we have some crusty Rev 9 coilovers. So that's completely my fault. I should have put some anti-seize on them when I put them on the car, but I wasn't even thinking. And then I drove it in the winter a couple times and didn't really wash it. So they're pretty crusty right now, but I'm going to end up probably hitting them with a wire brush and anti-seizing them in the next few days. But suspension-wise, it really doesn't have a ton. Everybody's always saying that you immediately need an angle kit, yada yada. This has been pretty bulletproof for me. The eBay blocks I did have an issue with. I snapped the it was the passenger side one, so I snapped the passenger side one. That was also somewhat my fault. When I was street testing it in Mexico one day, I hit a pretty hard angled like driveway to a cul-de-sac, but that was probably my fault. But the material, I could show that. Actually, let me go grab that real. So this is what I had happen. Could have been user error, but the casting material is definitely some like junk. So I would just recommend getting the PMC ones over the eBay like $40 blocks. You're gonna end up spending 60 bucks more, but in the long run, you're gonna end up saving yourself 100 bucks because you're not gonna have to buy it a second time. So front end, nothing too crazy. And then with the rear end, I have a full video series kind of going over what I've done to the rear end, but it has a full reinforced subframe with a 391 welded diff, max PP rods, the lower camber arms, pretty much Condor bushings throughout the whole car. So I have subframe bushings, diff mount bushings, trans mount bushings, engine bushings, or engine mounts, trans mounts, you get the idea. The only thing that's not Condor is the upper control arm, inner and outer bushings. Those are Powerflex, and same with the lower trailing arm bushings actually. So it's a mismatch of Condor and Powerflex pretty much through the whole rear end. But from my experience with it from the past drift event and a bunch of street testing, this rear end is pretty much bulletproof. feels like a go-kart out there, and it's super tight, so that's sick. I do have to dial in the camber a little bit. I have probably about 2 or 3 degrees of camber, maybe not even that much. I might be exaggerating, but I have a little bit of camber going on, so I'm probably going to end up zeroing that out once I put the 205s on, because then I'll have more grip with even tread wear instead of like burning off the insides, which I didn't really do because these are snow tires, so I barely went through any of them. But yeah, I almost forgot to mention the exhaust setup I have on here. So this is a full custom exhaust. You can see up there, there's a huge bottle resonator. I think it was 24 inches. And then it's got a straight pipe, cat delete. And then to this is like an eBay dual 3.5 inch exit. So it's somewhat big, definitely more than necessary on a 318. But I wanted to keep the dual exhaust look, and then to get mufflers on the dual exhausts, this was one of the only setups I really found. So I just kind of sent it, and then I had my buddy Lockwood. I'll throw his Instagram in the description because he's actually done all my exhausts. He did the 5 Series exhaust as well. Shout out. So definitely hit him up if you got some exhaust work or welding work to do. He actually also did the wastegate flange on here. So as you can see, good welds. This has been sitting for a little while, so there's a little bit of rust forming, but that's my fault. I should throw a little paint on that header. So taking a quick peek on the interior here, we got a Sparco Pro 2000 seat. I got that for like 300 bucks off Facebook, and then I picked up a slider off Amazon. I think that was another like 50 or 70 bucks, something like that. So that's the seat situation. Stock belt just there, and then you can bolt the stock seat belt receiver onto the Sparco seat. And then we got a PMC chassis mount shifter. I think that was in like the $100–150 range. Thrash racing wheel, that was also like 100 bucks with the, I think that's an NRG steering wheel adapter. That actually came off of a parts car, so technically free. I think those are usually like 70–80 bucks, something like that. And then I also have a glow shift water temp gauge, but that stopped working, so won't even include that in here. But that I have all the wiring and everything in, so I'm probably gonna get another gauge at some point, and then we'll have a working water temp gauge. As you can see, my door card is off. I keep busting window regulator clips. I think the actual slide is bent, so at some point I'm gonna invest in a new window regulator for this thing, but that's not the main priority. The main priority is seat time. So everything I've really done is mechanical to this car. That's why the interior and the style is lacking a little bit, but we'll get there, we'll get there. So things pretty basic. It's I don't know, let's try to total it up in my head real quick. So 600 for coils, 1200 for the car, and then say 1,000, well actually no, probably like 1,500 for the rest of the setup. So probably somewhere in like the $3,500 to $4,000 range as it sits, which pretty cheap for a seat time car. Take into account all the work has been done in my driveway for free by me, so definitely has a lot of man hours into it, but the actual price is pretty low. So yeah.
So I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little walkthrough of the budget E36. It's definitely a cheap seat time car. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it does its job. It gets down, and knock on wood, it starts up every time now. So probably just gonna rock this setup as it is for the time being until I have any issues. So if I ever throw timing or something like that, I'm probably gonna end up putting an LS in here, but I don't know. The M42, everybody talks smack about it, but I've kind of enjoyed it. This thing's been pretty reliable. I've dailied it for, I don't know, I've had it for 2 years now. I dailied it for almost a year. That was with minimal sliding. I would drift around here and there, but it had an LSD in it for the first few months, and then I put the 444 welded in. As soon as I did that, it pretty much became a street car, and I brought it to 2 events last year, and this year I drifted 1 event. I've been to 2, but as you saw in the video a couple weeks ago, ran into some issues, but now we're here. So gonna keep wrenching on it, doing small things here and there, but for the time being, this is pretty much the 2023 setup. All we need is a little livery, which is coming hopefully soon. I've been trying to get in contact with a few vinyl people, and I think you guys are going to find it pretty funny. So yeah, the only things to really look forward to on this thing are the livery and hopefully over fenders pretty soon, because in the rear got a pretty big spot with rust going through the quarter, and then I also burned through the paint on the new paint job through with the polishing wheel. So wouldn't hurt to slap some overs over it, and then I wouldn't even think about it. So overs, and that's pretty much it. Hopefully seat time for the rest of the year. Trying to get the V group bump, and yeah, once we get that and we're on road course, then it'll probably need some more power. So look into either a turbo or a motor swap, but hopefully that'll be put off till winter, because this thing is a money pit. So don't want two money pits, even though this already is, and we have the 5 Series. So I'm probably gonna do a build breakdown on that car too at some point, but that thing's been pretty reliable for a daily driver. So thanks for tuning in. That was my neighbor's tractor, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Make sure to throw a like and sub, and have a good one. Peace.
Times with the bros and the shit, and we roll with the cars, and it goes like, I don't wanna be lonely tonight. I don't wanna be lonely tonight. Don't wanna be lonely, so I spend some time with my homies. I don't wanna be lonely tonight. Don't wanna be lonely tonight. Don't wanna be lonely, so I go and spend some time with my motherfucking homies.